Our next hearing is on a resolution of concurrence to create the Missoula Valley Water Quality District. Mrs. Leahy.
Mayor Kemmis, members of the City Council, for the record, I'm Ellen Leahy, Director of the Missoula City County Health Department. It's my pleasure tonight to carry from the Missoula City County Board of Health to you a proposal. On October 15th, after about a year's worth of work and preparation, the staff did bring to the Missoula City County Health Board a proposal to create a water quality protection district and have that district essentially overlie the boundaries of our sole source aquifer. The need for that was evident. It is our sole source of drinking water. There's another portion of the need that we need to look at that I don't think the public is quite as aware of as they are as the fact that we have a sole source aquifer, and that is that we do not have local control over our drinking water. Control and authority rests with the state and the federal agencies. So we do not have the resources to monitor what's going on with our drinking water and any contamination of that, nor do we have the ability to enforce even existing regulations. So we felt it was very important to bring that control to the local level because, after all, we are the ones relying on the sole source of drinking water. We took that proposal to the County Commission on October 28th, and on November 4th, they unanimously passed a resolution of intent to create a water quality protection district. At this point, I'm formally asking this council to resolve to concur because the city falls within the boundaries of that district, and certainly the activities in the city and the population would make it very evident that the people of the city need that protection for our drinking water. Peter Nielsen will go over the proposal with you, the program plan, the fees, and the reasons and whatnot. Before he does that, I just want to add that to date, just to bring this proposal in front of you and therefore in front of the public, there has been a great deal of cooperation between the city and the county, just getting the scheduling together, the willingness to look at this. That is probably the most encouraging sign for this water quality protection district. It bodes very well, and I greatly appreciate your willingness to work together so that the citizens don't have to deal with any tensions between the agencies and they can look at just the issues as they pertain to water and to themselves. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Peter?
Mayor Kemmis and members of the council, my name is Peter Nielsen. I'm representing the Missoula City County Health Department tonight. Missoula Valley residents depend upon a clean and abundant supply of water. We've been fortunate to have a very clean and abundant supply of water and been able to almost take a clean supply of water for granted for generations here in the Missoula Valley. Unfortunately, we cannot do that any longer. We've begun to pollute our rivers and streams and lakes and our groundwater, and as the human population of the Missoula Valley grows, we're posing more and more threats to water quality every year. While the threats to water quality increase, the abilities of local government to protect drinking water in the Missoula Valley are very limited. The city and the county only have limited authority to protect drinking water because most of that authority resides with either the state government or the federal government. We also lack the funding to administer and to operate an effective local water quality program. The Montana legislature passed a new law in 1991 allowing local governments to form what are called local water quality districts. By creating a local water quality district, local government in Missoula can assume more direct control for the protection of drinking water in the Missoula Valley. Local water quality districts can be delegated the authority to enforce provisions of Montana state water quality law and also to administer local ordinances protecting water quality. Local water quality districts can also raise money to run those programs through establishing fees on improved properties within the boundaries of the district. The purpose of today's meeting and the purpose of my presentation is to present the proposed plan, the boundaries, the objectives, and the initial fees and budget for the Water Quality District. Before I get into discussing the proposed program, I'd like to start off by taking a couple of minutes to discuss some of the reasons that we feel that we need the tools that we're asking for to protect water quality in the Missoula Valley. We live above the aquifer that supplies our drinking water in the Missoula Valley, and our daily activities on the land can affect the quality of the water that we drink. There are about 70,000 people in the valley who now get their drinking water from an underground reservoir of water known as the Missoula Valley Aquifer. The aquifer extends throughout the valley from East Missoula, Milltown area on the east, out to Usan on the west, and down to Lolo on the south, encompassing the entire valley floor and partway up most of the major tributaries in the valley. The aquifer is the only source of drinking water for almost all the people who live in the Missoula Valley. It has been designated as a sole source aquifer by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which means that it provides most of the drinking water for the people who live here, and there's no economically practical available source of water as an alternative. Now, we have become aware over the last decade and a half of the vulnerability that we have for our drinking water because of a number of pollution events. This overhead slide shows a number of the major events that have occurred that we know about that have caused water quality degradation in the Missoula Valley. Back in the early 1970s, we had a major gasoline spill, 250,000 gallons of gasoline in the Grant Creek drainage. That spill went undetected for 5 months before it was found. Also in the early 70s, we had herbicide contamination near the weed control shop on Reserve Street. We've had heavy metals detected near the landfill. Another gasoline spill from the pipeline, this time on Lavelle Creek. Whoops. I'm out of order here. Here we go. In 1982. In the mid-1980s, gasoline contamination from a leaking underground storage tank caused the closure of 20 wells in the California Street area. In 1989, 2 wells owned by Mountain Water Company were shut down because of contamination with perchloroethylene, which is a cancer-causing substance. It's a potent solvent used in dry cleaning and automotive repair shops. In 1990, bacterial contamination caused the closure of 2 wells owned by the Mountain Water Company. And during the period 1990 to 92, we had 5 known gasoline spills at the gasoline pipeline terminal on Razor Road. Didn't leave myself much room up here. Those are some of the historical events that we know of. Current events that we have going on today include diesel contamination on the north side underlying the railroad yard, bacterial contamination of wells in the Frenchtown and lower Hayes Creek area down the Bitterroot Valley, 13 mountain water wells that are currently testing positive for perchloroethylene, the same substance that has caused 2 of those wells to be closed, arsenic contamination of groundwater in Milltown, bacterial contamination of approximately 10 to 15% of all the samples that are run through our lab at the health department today. And if these were publicly owned wells, regulations would require those wells to be shut down or to be disinfected before use, but people are drinking that water. Currently, 10% of the private wells in Linda Vista area exceed federal standards for nitrates. Source is believed to be human sewage. And also currently we have gasoline contamination in at least 2 areas in the urban area that we have not been able to identify the source of the pollution. Those are some of the known pollution threats and known pollution episodes that are going on today and that have happened over the last 10 years. We've also been fortunate to have the money provided in a one-time grant from the Mountain Water Company to do an inventory of pollution sources in the Missoula urban area. And these are some of our findings. We find that we have 6,200 septic systems, roughly half of the urban area population that's not on public sewer that's discharging human waste into the drinking water. 3,350 storm drains, 187 underground storage tanks, 10 dry cleaners, and so forth. One of the reasons that we proposed the water quality district, that we feel that we need a water quality district, is because of the cost, the enormous cost that can result to a community as a result of pollution of groundwater. As I mentioned, we've already had 2 wells in our community shut down from solvent contamination, public wells. There also have been some private wells shut down from the same contamination. And gasoline contamination has shut down approximately 30 wells in the urban area. It costs a lot of money to dig new wells or to install a treatment system to treat polluted water. If the Mountain Water Company were required to install a treatment system, a conventional treatment system, to treat all of the water that it serves to its customers in the Missoula area, it would cost roughly $20 million to construct. That, under its current rate structure, would result in a 36% rate increase just to build the facility. And the company has told us that they feel it could double the rates on an annual basis because it would cost money to operate the facility as well. It also costs money to replace wells. It could cost less than installing a new treatment system, but you have to have a place to get the water from, and it has to be a clean source. Now, these costs are those that would affect people in the city most directly, but folks who are on individual wells could also face potentially huge costs for replacing their water systems. I have researched water pollution costs in various communities throughout the United States, in the Northeast, in Minnesota, in Ohio, California, prepared a report called The Potential Cost of Groundwater Pollution in the Missoula Valley. And copies of those were made available to the council in your packet and are available back underneath the coat rack in the back of the room. Some of the other costs that I've been able to identify, some of the most serious costs include devalued real estate and diminished home or commercial real estate sales. This, in fact, was the major cost identified in a study of 21 cities that had groundwater contamination problems in Minnesota. Also identified as a substantial cost in the Minnesota study was lost commercial and industrial development. Now, these are things that can impact us very directly and our economy very directly in the Missoula Valley, as well as affecting our public health. The costs of water pollution may in fact be substantial. We've proposed the Missoula Valley Water Quality District to help protect public health in this community and also to help to ensure a long-term economic vitality in the valley. There's no guarantee, however, that the activities that we propose to the Water Quality District are going to solve all of our problems or prevent some of these costs from coming to roost. It's going to take broad commitment and broad ownership of the problem from the public, as well as action from the government agencies to solve this problem. However, our chances of success, we feel, are greatly diminished without the tools that we're asking for through the Water Quality District. The proposed boundaries of the Water Quality District are depicted on this map and also the map that's on top of the trash can there in the back of the room. These boundaries would include the entire area that overlies the sole source aquifer. It would extend up to include Milltown and East Missoula on the east, go out to Uson on the west, and down to include Lolo on the south. The objectives of the Water Quality District that we have proposed are 6. Monitoring and research, inspections of facilities that are regulated under federal laws, state laws, and local laws that can cause pollution of water quality, enforcement of state water quality law, administration of local ordinances, public education, planning, and financing of facilities to protect water quality. I'd like to take just a moment to go through each of these briefly. First objective is monitoring and research. We've proposed this as a fairly high priority item in the Water Quality District. Much of the money that we proposed in the budget is to be spent on this activity, and it's very important to have good information. The City Council needs good information, the County Commissioners need good information, the Health Department and the Health Board. We all need good information on which to base decisions to protect water quality. It's a lot like going to the doctor when you have an illness. You want a pretty good diagnosis of your illness before the doctor prescribes a cure. And we're talking about spending public dollars to solve problems. We need to know where those dollars can be spent most effectively to get the best results. And so we have proposed a fairly detailed monitoring and research plan. These are some of the items that we have included in that plan for the first year. And we feel it's a very important priority. The second objective is to inspect facilities that can cause groundwater pollution in the Missoula urban area. And we propose to integrate the inspections that are conducted presently by state officials, local officials, the health department, the city, and also federal officials into one central inspection program. So rather than being inspected 5 different times during a year, a facility or a business would under this program be visited once each year to be inspected for these 5 programs, one of which is not yet adopted, but which will be considered probably by the council at some time during the next year, the Wellhead Protection Ordinance. This was an objective that was suggested by the business community and the Chamber of Commerce when we met with them this summer in planning the Water Quality District, and we feel it's a very important objective. The third objective that Ellen mentioned is enforcement. We lack authority now to enforce water quality law in Missoula. We do not have the local authority to enforce the Montana Water Quality Act. I want to mention a couple of cases to illustrate the limitations that we have. Many people here may be familiar with the cases last summer of folks dumping toxic materials into the storm drains on Patty Street. 2 different businesses that we found discharging waste into the storm drains. We wanted to do something about that. We wanted to try to prosecute those cases, but we didn't have a local water quality law on which to prosecute. We had to get creative. We cited those companies for littering on a public street. That's the extent of our authority. We could do that. It worked okay. They went to municipal court. They got a $50 fine and some bad publicity, but it does illustrate the limitations of our authority. Another case that I want to mention is the gasoline pipeline spill of April 15th of this year at the Conoco facility. In response to that spill, the health department requested an extension of the authority to enforce the Montana Water Quality Act on a one-time experimental basis because we don't have that authority. We felt that the state was not in a position, was not taking an aggressive position to solve that problem, negotiate with the company. We wanted the local ability to resolve it with that company in our own community. They granted us that authority on a one-time experimental basis because we were planning the Water Quality District, and it was a good way for us to demonstrate our capabilities to work in a capability of working in enforcement of the Water Quality Act. We feel that we resolved that issue fairly productively without going to court. We were able to convince the company voluntarily to install containment systems, vapor alarm systems, and to much more aggressively pursue the groundwater cleanup at that site than the state had been able to convince them to do in response to 5 previous spills. So we feel that we need this authority. The Water Quality District would also have the authority to administer local ordinances protecting water quality. However, the legislation that allows the creation of the district limits the authority to 4 specific categories, and I won't read through these, but these are the 4. These are simply tools that we need to take care of our water quality locally. Fourth objective is public education. Public education is very important because there's no amount of coercing, no amount of enforcement that you can do that will convince people to comply unless they understand the value of what you're trying to do, the importance of taking care of water quality, and there's a broad commitment to taking care of water quality in the community. We propose to augment the highly successful and valuable work that the Mountain Water Company has been able to do over the last couple of years in public education. We don't propose to replace that. We propose to target our public education at 2 main groups. First, the regulated community. And this was again suggested by the business community and the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber is willing to work with us as a liaison to the regulated community. Provide public education to these folks on how they can comply, who to talk to about compliance, what the laws are, what the alternatives are, how they can solve problems. And educate individuals primarily in homeowners. We're talking about homeowners, household people who are responsible for purchasing decisions and decisions on how to dispose of household hazardous waste products. Very important objective. Move right along here. The next objective is planning. We propose to prepare a long-term water quality management plan. Within the first year, we would conduct a public process to do that, and that plan then would be provided then to the council and to the commissioners to provide ongoing guidance on how to continue operations of the water quality district in subsequent years. This will help us identify issues ahead of time to prevent pollution rather than simply responding to pollution, which is a much more efficient way to spend our dollars. That plan would be updated, we propose, every 2 years. The last objective is to finance facilities to protect water quality, to build things, to take care of water quality. The legislation allows a district to spend only up to $100,000 each year to build, with the approval of both the City Council and the County Commissioners, to build these sorts of facilities to take care of water pollution problems. That's a limitation that is important to note, because this cannot be used as a super sewer district. This cannot be used to build all the sewers that we want in the valley. Those will still have to be done through the special improvement district process that the council and the commissioners already have available to them. Our initial proposed fees are based on a classification system that takes into account the volume of water withdrawn and the volume of waste produced at every fee-assessed unit within the boundaries of the district. Fees would be assessed on every property with real property with improvements. One fee per property. Every property with a building on it, including taxable property, tax-exempt property, and mobile homes. There are about 25,000 properties within the proposed boundaries of the water quality district. Fee category 1 would apply to the vast majority of properties within the district. Fee category 2 would apply to somewhere between 500 and 600 properties. Fee category 3 to about 30 properties. Fee category 1, the base fee is $13 per year. That's about $1.08 per month. And that would apply to those properties that are not fully connected to public sewer. Public sewer being the City of Missoula's sewage treatment plant, Lolo's sewage treatment plant, and the Elmar Estates sewage treatment system. Those folks would get a $4 discount and would be charged $9 per year, roughly 75 cents per month. Fee category 2, the fees would be double the rates of fee category 1, and this would apply to those units that use much more water or discharge much more water. Roughly a property with 5 single-family residences on it, between 5 and 44 residences, would fit into fee category 2. Fee category 3 is for the very large dischargers, and there are, as I said, about 30 of those within the district. The fee would be $26 per 10,000 gallons per day, up to a maximum of $650. There would be about 4 properties who would pay that maximum fee of $650. The last overhead. We have proposed a timeline. As Ellen mentioned, the county commissioners met on the 28th of October to conduct a public meeting and hear the plan. The commissioners adopted the resolution of intent to create the district on the 4th of November and referred it to the City Council. The City Council tonight is having a hearing on the resolution of concurrence. And this is not a final decision on whether or not to create the district, but simply a resolution of concurrence to create the district. Following that, if the council decides to adopt the resolution of concurrence next Monday night, following that action, a published notice would be published in the newspaper. The notice would be posted at various public places throughout the valley, and a postcard would be mailed to everyone who would be charged a fee in the water quality district. The postcard would let folks know where they can get copies of the resolution of intent and where they can get copies of protest forms to protest the creation of the district. On this date, if we go with this timeline, on the 22nd of November, the protest period would begin. It would end on the 21st of December. 30-day protest period. If during that time 20% of the property owners within the boundaries of the district protest the creation of the district, the commissioners and the council would be barred from further action to create the district without submitting the matter to a referendum. If, however, 20% do not protest in that time period, the commissioners and the city council could create the district without a referendum. A public hearing would be held, and this date is wrong, I apologize for that. The date would be the 11th of January, 1993, Monday night city council meeting, at which the city and county would hold a joint public hearing to hear and decide upon all the protests and hear final public comment on the matter before taking action. The district could then be created sometime in mid-January. Fees would begin to be collected in July. On July 1st of 1993, it would show up on a property tax bill, be $450 for those, it would be $450 or half the fee for those in the city, showing up on the property tax bill next November. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I know you need to get public comment too.
Let's see if there are any questions for Peter. Mr. Hermes.
Peter, if it was adopted and there wasn't a protest and we went forward, who would administer the program then?
The city and the county have, city council and the county commissioners have discussed administration of this district and have proposed through an interlocal agreement that would be adopted contingent upon creation of the district, would propose that the district be administered by a board of directors that would consist of the Missoula City County Health Board with the addition of one member who is a member of the Board of County Supervisors of the Missoula County Conservation District. The employees would be employees of the health department and would be administered under the county's health plan. The board of directors of the district, however, would have very limited authorities, and those are spelled out in the law. I'd be happy to provide copies of the law. I brought some with me. The authorities of the board of directors are limited to employing personnel and administrative sort of authorities. The authorities to establish fees, to adopt the budgets, to adopt all the ordinances, and basically everything that really counts, remains with the elected officials who are on both the city council and the county commissioners. And what you folks have talked about and jointly agreed to contingent upon creation of this is that you would have to jointly agree on all of these actions before they would be taken. So the city and the county commissioners would review the budget and the fees every year and the program before approving it and be really in control.
Bob?
Do you have a feel for how many new personnel would be needed to run the district then?
Yeah, and I don't know if you have your copy with you, but the budget calls for, the budget would be roughly $284,000. Roughly half of that would be staff and half operations, monitoring wells, doing research projects, and so forth. The staff equivalent time would be 3 1/2 time full-time equivalents. That includes a half-time secretary. We presently have 2 full-time employees at the health department that run our water quality program. Those 2 people are funded entirely on federal grants, which are for special projects. The only reason we're doing anything on water quality is that we have that money. That money disappears next year. One grant runs out in April and the other runs out in June. So unless we're able to scramble and get creative and find some new other funding sources, we need this money just to be able to continue what we're doing, and we're proposing to expand it somewhat as well.
Any other questions for Peter? Mrs. Shea.
Peter, although personally I'm very supportive of this concept and welcome any opportunity for the city and the county to work together, particularly about water quality, what would you say to those people who say, isn't this just another tax and a way to tax people in a different format?
Well, it's not a tax, it's a fee, but that's not a good answer because if you don't pay the fee, the same thing could happen to you as if you don't pay the tax. It's not just another tax because it is specifically targeted to a specific program that is well planned and thought out and approved by the county commissioners and the city council year to year. It's not just another tax to help run local government. It's the tools that we need to be able to take care of our own future here, really, to be able to determine our own destiny in terms of protecting water quality. Without those tools, we don't have the ability to do the things that need to be done to protect water quality here, and we're just not going to have these things happen. The State Water Quality Bureau has 3 full-time employees right now to cover enforcement of the Water Quality Act for the entire state. You know, when we ask for action on something like Linda Vista, which is a fairly high-profile, difficult issue, it takes 9 months to get a response. And that's not to criticize those people. They mean well, but they simply don't have the ability to do what we need to do, even on, you know, the most important issues. And we start talking about public education and monitoring and research and building things locally to take care of water quality. That's something that's just not available to us with state and federal dollars. So we do need these resources for a very specific, well planned out, well thought out purpose. That'd be my response.
Another part of the answer that we might give to Elaine's question is that unlike the property tax, that this is more evenly spread and is able to be spread to many properties that aren't subject to the property tax.
I think the philosophy behind this legislation, the philosophy behind the fee system is that everyone contributes to the problem and everyone needs to be a part of the solution. And rather than going on property taxes and going on the same system as you have with assessments and everybody paying a different fee depending on your assessed value, we're setting a base fee that is fairly modest and that would be there. And I guess I would recommend to the council that those fees stay the same for some period of time, for perhaps at least 3 years, perhaps longer, that we look at living with those fees to do this program. Because we have substantial startup costs involved with the district, I think that we'll have an ability to do that, and so we'll get the work done.
Mrs. Schaefer.
By saying those properties that don't pay regular taxes, you're referring to schools, churches, and other nonprofit organizations? Or
Yes.
just schools and churches?
The
Hospitals?
The legislation provides for a fee to be assessed on every improved property, every real property with improvements, including taxable and tax-exempt property. So anything that's on the county assessor's records today would pay a fee, 1 per property. So yes, a school, the city hall, the health department building, you know, every improved property in the hospitals would pay fees. That's correct.
Mrs. Gingarelli.
2 other responses that I can think of to Elaine's question would deal with the State Department of Health and Environmental Sciences response to local issues like this. It's been my experience kind of watching them over the years as a prior health board member that 2 things have entered into their reluctance to act on the local level. Number 1 is probably the fact that the tax base in the state of Montana isn't adequate enough, or at least they don't believe it's adequate enough to provide the kind of enforcement and manpower to local communities in such a huge location that we need. And also the fact that over the last several years, the prioritization at the state level really hasn't been there for local water quality issues. I can remember many, many times where the local health department needed help in the area of water quality enforcement, and you know, would maybe 6 months down the line, somebody would call back from the state level. So that has been a tremendous frustration, and I think that enters into why we need to control things locally.
Any other questions for Peter from council members? We'll give an opportunity for the public to comment in just a moment. Any other questions for Peter? Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. I've come back up here so I can use my overheads again. I think it might come in handy. Thanks for letting me do that since I bothered to take notes. The first question was regarding the fees. And I'll put the fee slide back up there. A lot of thought has gone into this, and actually we have simplified the fee structure from what we originally had proposed. I want to stress that these are initial proposed fees, and the fees will not be finally adopted until the county commissioners and the city council eventually will go through budget proceedings and create, after the district is created, and then the budget is deliberated upon in much more detail, and the fees can be deliberated upon in more detail. So these could be modified. These are initial proposed fees to discuss with the public in light of whether or not this should be created, and whether or not this is something we want to do. There was a question as to who pays how much, and whether there are an unfair burden on those who don't create as much of the problem. And I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, the legislation that the Montana legislature adopted does place some limitation on us as far as the fees go. The legislation provides that the maximum fee that's charged to any property can only be 50 times the amount of the base fee. So if your base fee is $13, the maximum fee you can charge is $650. In order to get that through the legislature, that compromise was necessary, and I can't change that. I might like to, but we can't change that. So we have that to live with. We had an initial proposal that we were discussing to charge more for businesses that handle and store and transport and use hazardous and toxic materials in the community. That could still be done. If not in the first year, it could be done later. That could change the fee structure, and those who are responsible for those sorts of materials could pay a higher fee. I do want to mention, also we could charge a fee for simply classifying major sources of pollution, because it's also stated in the law that the fee structure can be based on the quality of the discharge as well as the quantity. We need better data on which to do some of that. We could develop that in the first year or two and change the fees to where we're charging higher fees for those who are contributing more of the problem. I threw this slide back up because the gentleman mentioned that there was major sources of gasoline and perchloroethylene and so forth. I wanted to point out that we have problems that are caused by human sewage, and these are prevalent throughout the boundaries of the district. Bacterial contamination is a problem that's caused by human sewage, and that's you and I, everyone in this room. The contamination of the Maurice Avenue well and the Mountain View well are both from those sources, as well as the problems that we've had out in Hayes Creek, down the Bitterroot, and out in the Touchet Lane area. Also, nitrate pollution in the Linda Vista area is caused by human sewage. So everybody does contribute to that problem. Perchloroethylene is a solvent that I did mention has been used in dry cleaning and also in the automotive repair shop industry. You might also be interested to know that perchloroethylene and other solvents such as 1,1-trichloroethylene and 1,1-trichloroethylene and all these other, methyl ethyl doorknob and methyl ethyl, all that stuff. A lot of these things are in household products that we use, and people are putting these into their drain fields. In fact, some people are using these to clean their drain fields. Septic tank drain cleaners, contain solvents that some communities have forbidden to be used. So it's not just the industry that's putting this stuff into the groundwater, and I think you should recognize that. As far as metals go, there's heavy metals. That's true at the Milltown Reservoir. It's caused by upstream mining activities, but we're putting large amounts of metals into the landfill every day. And how many people here have batteries at home that you have thrown into the garbage recently? I bet everybody has. And we're all contributing to that problem. So again, the philosophy of the law, while it may not be perfect, is that everyone contributes to the problem and everyone needs to be part of the solution. The issue also was raised about fines. The maximum fine that we can charge now for the littering ordinance is $50. The Water Quality Act, if we're able to have a local enforcement authority to enforce Water Quality Act, Montana state law, the maximum penalty on that is $20,000 per day. Now, it's not very often that anybody gets hit with that level of a fine, but that does open the door to much stiffer fines. I do want to stress that it is Our philosophy at the health department, it's very much my philosophy, and I will be supervising the district once it's created, if it's created. It's our philosophy to use public education and local problem solving first before taking an enforcement approach. The enforcement capability gives you the clout that you need to conduct productive negotiations. Unless you have that club, you can't really sit down at the table and have productive negotiations with a company like Conoco or whoever it might be. So we don't necessarily intend to flood the courts and to assess a lot of fines. That's not the objective. The objective is to protect water quality and to solve problems. We need that tool in order to do that. So again, that addresses the fine issue. Another question was on enforcement. Why can't the state do it, and how will we be able to do it? The state can't do it probably for a number of reasons. The reason that I would point out again is the lack of staff at the State Water Quality Bureau to cover the entire state. 3 full-time employees in the Enforcement Division of the Water Quality Bureau. It covers the entire state. That is not many resources available to take on problems. They're only able to take on the largest and most serious pollution problems that exist in the state. They can't come down and deal with somebody who's dumping oil into a storm drain. They just don't have the capability to do that. We can't expect them to. They're good people, they mean well, but they're not able to solve all of our problems. The other thing about it is that we can do a better job locally of solving our problems. We're more accessible to people in business. Our decision makers are more accessible. We can provide better local technical assistance. We're here. They can call us on a local phone call without calling long distance. They can come down and see us and talk across the table and have coffee. We can solve problems locally. And that's really, I think, what this is all about. The concern came up again about the elected officials controlling the district, and I think that that's an important thing to drive home again. The legislation does provide that the governing bodies within the boundaries of the district, that being the county commissioners and the city council, have the exclusive authority to make the major decisions that pertain to the operation of the district. Setting of fees, setting the budget, adopting all the ordinances, regulations that may be adopted. Those all have to be done by the elected officials. The board of directors, which would be the health board, simply has the authority to conduct day-to-day affairs under the oversight of the elected body. So I think that there's good accountability there, and there was a reason for the legislature to set it up that way. One gentleman asked if there would be another public hearing, and the mayor responded that yes, there would be on the 11th of January. Tonight's hearing is simply to help guide the council in deciding whether or not to vote, perhaps next Monday night, on whether or not to adopt the resolution of concurrence. The county commissioners have adopted a resolution of intent to create the district, to put the public on notice that this is something that they intend to do. The council then would, if they do this, adopt a resolution of concurrence to be included within the boundaries of the district. If the council doesn't do that, then the city cannot be included within the district, and nobody in the city can be charged that fee. Obviously, that would limit the ability of us to take care of problems. But this hearing is just on the decision on whether to adopt the resolution of concurrence. Following that, everybody's mailed a postcard. There's a public notice, public protest period, and following the public protest period, there's 3 weeks to count the public protests, and then a public hearing to hear final consideration, basically, on whether or not to go ahead and create the district that could then be created sometime in January. So we are still somewhat early in the process. I think that answers all the questions.
Thank you, Peter.
I have one more question for Peter, if I may.
Well, okay, Will, you'll need to come to the microphone with it.
Will Snodgrass again. Peter, if we have increased financial resources and manpower, I assume that we're going to be doing more monitoring and testing, and that there will be some numbers forthcoming from those procedures. And I would like to know if you would be willing, as a public health official, to see that these numbers are made public and available. And secondly, if you would tell us, I would like you to promise this community that if we have any more well contamination from perchloroethylene, for example, that the press releases will accurately reflect the health concerns. With respect to the 4 wells contaminated with perchloroethylene, that the press release said there will be no short-term health effects. The hair on the back of my neck stood up because we all know full and well that pancreatic cancer is the long-term result of exposure to those chemicals. So would you promise that we will see accurate press releases, first of all?
Okay, you had two questions, I guess. The first is, would the results of would we spend money on research and monitoring? Yes, we would. Would the results of that be available to the public? Of course they would. Of course. I mean, it's public information. That's the reason that we're doing it. These are some of the things that we're talking about doing with monitoring and research. As far as the press release that you refer to, I didn't work for the department when that was put out. I don't know what it said, but I think in hearing what you said and recalling what happened, what we had there is our wells that were contaminated for a short period of time, and then they were closed, and so they're no longer used. So if there was a health effect to be, it would have been a short-term health effect because there's not an ongoing use of that water. However, there is an ongoing use of water in some wells that has a lower level of that contamination. And I'm not sure that we know what the health effects of that are. I think that's part of the reason that we need to learn more about our aquifer. That would be my response to that.
Thank you, Peter. And now we will close the public hearing.